Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Kumar Dattani, and I welcome you today to the Inside Am webinar. Ocean, who was supposed to be hosting today's webinar, is currently unavailable today due to some unforeseen circumstances. So I'm going to be your host today. Uh, so today we're going to talk about product management. It's one of the most up-and-coming professional careers around the world, and it is in demand. There are about 50,000 job opportunities in product management right now, and it definitely pays well. So product managers are people who bring different functions like engineering, design, marketing, operations, and tie them back to the product and the consumer. In that way, product management is almost like a mini CEO position. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about what career paths lead to product management, what skills are required, and what does it take to become one. And to give us some insights into it and to answer your questions, we have with us two product management experts, Anusha and Divya. Anusha is the group product manager at Flipkart, and she's an IIM Indore and NIT Surat alumna. She currently leads cancellations and returns for Flipkart and manages experience and profitability for the entire reverse funnel. Divya is currently the senior product manager at Uber. She's been a senior product manager at Amazon before this and is a Berkeley School of Information at SPJIM alum. Uh, Anusha and Divya, thank you so much for joining us today. Uh, let me just start by putting forward the first question to you guys. Why has this particular career become so popular in recent times? What were the major factors that have aided its growth?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So if you see how things have been changing, right, with apps coming in, with all the technology coming in, there's been a need for changing the original role of sort of solution architect, which sort of existed, right, into something which would truly enable the multiplier effect that we've been looking for, right? And I think that's sort of when this role really became important. User experience started becoming important, right? So it started becoming, I think, not just about um, what can we do with technology, but how best can we do it to match the business goals and the user goals. I think that's sort of where this fit in, right? So if you see most of the book definitions of what product management is, ends up being those three circles that you see overlapping, right? You have design, tech, and business, and you see product management sort of sitting in the center. So yeah, and that's where most opportunities have been, are being made, new things coming about, right? Innovation happening.
Right.
Divya?
Yeah, Divya.
No, I think Anusha has covered this one pretty well. So since I know folks have a lot of questions also, I don't want to repeat what she's already said, so we can probably go to the next one.
Sure. So the next question is by Samaranath. How has the pandemic affected the PM role in terms of changed priorities of consumer behavior? So, yeah, anyone?
Maybe I'll start with this one. So I think I think with the pandemic, across industries, actually, you can see this, that the way people have been shopping or purchasing has changed a lot, right? So I think for folks, say, who have been working in e-commerce, for example, over the past year or so, you would see that a lot more shopping has started happening in that industry. For folks who've been in, say, travel kind of businesses, obviously there was a lot less travel happening around the world. If I look at my own company, there are two sides of the business, right? There's mobility and there's delivery. So mobility, obviously, with rides is one of those areas where in the pandemic, compared to pre-pandemic, would be very different because a lot fewer people would probably be stepping out, and it varies from country to country based off of when the waves have hit them. Whereas delivery obviously does very well because everybody wants stuff delivered now to them. So I think you can literally like go at it industry by industry and think about which are the ones that worked really well in the pandemic versus which are the ones that potentially took a little bit of a back seat when it comes into the total share of wallet that consumers have.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, definitely a lot of industries have been affected, but none so much. I think more than the travel industry, and I think you both are somewhere related and somewhere working in the travel sector, as to say. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to know your views. This. So we move on to the next question from Fazin. We have what are the activities that a PM does on a usual day?
That's a broad one,
Yeah.
right?
Anusha, maybe
Um,
you can go with your list and then I'll go with my list and we'll see where
yeah,
they intersect.
sure.
Great.
Um, so instead of a day, right, I'm going to talk about what a PM should be doing. And I think it translates into a day in different ways. So, as a PM, our job is first to, I think, identify the right problem statement to work on, right? And the right problem statement is this is done by multiple ways, a lot of which are generally covered in most MBA courses, right? You'll do your SWOT analysis, you'll do opportunity analysis, right? What is competition doing there? Is there something that I can do, depending upon the context then you are in, right? And based on that, and uh, where are you trying to get to? Does it make sense for you to pick up something, not pick up something? Right, that is one sort of way of doing it. The other is, let's say if you're already on a live product, then you look at what's working, what's not working, and see, are the gaps to be fixed, are there hygiene issues to be fixed? So with this you sort of come upon a list of your backlog plus roadmap, right? That comes about. And then once you have it, like, there are two things that come up there, right? One is a problem space, then you sort of figure out what is the solution space around it. So now that I know what my problem is looking like, what do I build? Who should I build it for? How do I go about it? What chunk of the problem can I actually target when I build something out? Right. So these are absolute basic things that you do as a product manager, right? Figure out what problem should you be working on and how should you target the problem. So what is the solve that you're building for it? What's the experience platform? Right. So that's in that space. Platform is interesting because then you think about, hey, 5 use cases are coming about, what can I build to ensure that the next use case that comes about like this gets simpler? So these are the standards, right? And then let's say you are executing on something, you are in the process of building something out. Then there's like a ton of things, right? You have to do your daily checks with the engineer in terms of are things moving or not. You've got to do your stakeholder checks. In most scenarios, if you're in a slightly bigger organization, chances are that you're not the only team that's working on whatever you're building out, right? There'll be 5 teams out there. And when that happens, the possibility of something getting blocked somewhere is extremely high, right? Or the design has not come out in time, or somebody suddenly is not aligned on something. So stakeholder management blows up in the execution phase of things, right? Then depends on, let's say you are in the launch phase of something, right? So pre-launch, there's an entire different set of prep that you got to do. Are you set up for AB? Are you set up for testing? Are your metrics in place, right? That's something that a lot of people typically miss out on because of all the excitement of actually building something out, right? But you got to measure it. So where are you with that? And then in the, let's say it's launched, then you have your entire measurement thing going on and standard metrics. So it's generally, let's say if you've got 2 3 products in different phases, then either you're evangelizing what you want to do, or you're actually, writing the PRD for what you want to do, or stakeholder management or metric management. There are a couple of things though that we also have as rituals, right? Which is you always keep looking at your metrics on a daily or a weekly basis, depending on how mature your product is, right? You always do your project check-ins with your engineering team, your sprint checks, your backlog grooming sessions. Those become your more of ritual things that you always end up doing. Uh, yeah.
That's actually quite a lot. Uh, so Divya, yeah, you must, you probably would have a different, somewhat different opinion on this, and what kind of work that you daily, do on a daily basis.
No, I think it's largely similar in that again, right? I don't think that the specifics of the job really change. So across industries and across companies, everything that Anusha listed is typically what any PM would be looking at doing in terms of how they structure their roadmap and how they're working on the various products and the various phases that they're at. The only pieces where I think it gets more tactical or it changes more is based off of, say, size of the company could dictate something like, as Anusha was mentioning again, you will have more stakeholder management in a larger company structure versus if you're in a startup, because there are fewer stakeholders, it gets a lot easier. So in a startup, you often also get like an end-to-end ownership in a certain way where there will be just one team running an entire process. So that makes the day-to-day tactical work a little different, where it's more of, say, you're only working with, say, engineering, design, and you get to make all the decisions, versus in a larger company where multiple teams are in various places, so in various stages. And therefore, then you have to also coordinate with various people, because you're probably launching one part of something, someone else is launching something allied, or something, or a change that you make in for something that you are launching might impact somebody else's system upstream or downstream, which means that you then have to make sure that those things are also in place. Otherwise, you could just accidentally break something and 5 days later you find out from someone else, right? So I think that's where it really changes in terms of the tactical nature and how much more you'll have to think about in terms of how you're scaling it and so on. But the actual day-to-day activities, or the way PMs approach the work, is fairly standard. So you will have a roadmap, you will have a backlog, and then you will always be deciding and prioritizing on the basis of that roadmap what you're doing and how you're actually going about doing it across the various phases based on where the product is.
Right. So, like, specifically, the tasks remain the same, but what changes is, it depends upon what kind of organization, what kind of product, and what stage of the life cycle the product is in. And yeah, and I think that makes sense. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the next question. What set of skills does one need, to develop a career in product management? And this question is by Aparna.
So I think for me, I've always kind of felt that it helps if you're a little bit of a jack of all trades for product, because there is a lot of stuff that you're expected to know. But personally, I think from a career point of view, what I also find or have found to be very useful is you'll see that for really good product managers, while they will know a bunch of things and will understand a bunch of things, they will typically spike on one or two things. So to give you an example, right, because as a PM, you're talking to engineering, you're talking to business stakeholders, you're talking to design, you're talking to the data science team for metrics and measurement and so on. You are expected to know the basics of all of this, right? So you can't have a good conversation with an engineer if you don't understand the architecture of what your team has built. You can't talk to a designer if you don't know what the customers are expecting. You don't know basics of UX principles. You don't know how you want to actually design that product and why you want to make a certain call from a product perspective, right? But having said that, if you had one person who was exceptionally good at all of those, they would be some kind of a unicorn, and I don't think such a person actually exists. So what I have typically seen is that a good PM will be someone who actually spikes very well on one or two of these. So someone might be exceptional with design. Someone else might be exceptional with metrics. This doesn't mean to say that they don't know the other stuff, but they will just be super exceptional in one area, and then they use that also to play to the kind of roles that they want. So, for example, if you spike at design, you might do more of consumer-facing products because you have, especially like the cutting edge kind of things, because you have that thought process of, what's next that can actually be built there. Versus say if you were if you were stronger at like the tech part, you might do something which is more like platform oriented, or do more of cutting edge tech work, because now you know the next big thing, right? So I think that's where it changes. So if you are interested in product management, I would say you would typically be the kind of person who's interested in a lot of things. You're kind of building all of those skills, making sure that you understand the basics of all of those, but then you will also understand naturally which is that area that you potentially can really spike at. And that's the area I would also say you should focus on and push on, so that even when you're interviewing for the job, right, it's very clear that, okay, this person can do the job, but they are also exceptionally good at this area. So it helps also slot in a team, because oftentimes when people are looking for PMs for their team as well, you try and make sure you have a mix of such individuals so that the team can also complement each other's skill sets.
The one thing that I also find matters a lot as a PM is, apart from the skill sets, you got to have a very different attitude, right? Which is, you know, irrespective of whether you're feeling up or not about it, if the PM does not bring enthusiasm into the room, I feel like things break, right? So you got to bring in the enthusiasm, irrespective of whether you believe in it or not, right? Because if that's not there, then engineering, analytics, design, all of it sort of falls apart, right? So when you look at people saying that PMs end up being the glue, that's actually true, right? You are the one who brings in the belief that hey, this is the right thing to do, right? Because ultimately you're the one who the PMs put the prioritization list together, right? So if the PM doesn't believe in it, then it won't work. And I think that's one big bit. Skill wise, I also believe that sometimes, again, I'm not sure if it falls into skill or attitude, but my biggest learning has been always leave your assumptions behind, right? So that's sort of another underlying thing under almost every skill, right? So Divya touched upon a lot of skills, and all of these are important. And I've seen some people who get by purely on relationships because of spike on people, by the way, right? Stakeholder management. So that's a very different take altogether. But the underlying thing is, I think, again, leaving your assumptions behind all the time. So can you keep asking the whys, right? If somebody comes at you with, hey, can you build this out for me, right? Keep asking the why so that you actually get to what the right problem is. So whatever the method be, if you as a person can get to the right problem to build it out of what you want to build, um, then I think you've cracked about 50% of it. Yeah.
So could you tell us, some actual features or products that you worked on, and how basically, what sort of work you've done on them, and so as to the viewers can understand what kind of actual day-to-day activities also happen, in a product manager's day.
Yeah, so I can start for this one. So I've actually done a bunch of very different product management roles. I have worked on everything from way back before apps on a jobs website to actually a backend tool which was used by risk investigators to something which was more product marketing. So that was for I used to be product manager for Kindle in India. To launching new benefits for Amazon Prime. And now what I do is actually improving the in-app help experience and self-serve for Uber Eats. So it's been pretty varied that way. Like some of these products are more platform, some of these are more customer facing. If I look at what I'm doing right now, which is more customer facing, in that space, I would say that because it is because it's around, say, self-serving of help as well as the in-app help experience, the parts of the skills that become very important, right? One part of it is the stakeholder management, because at Uber, we launch things globally. So it's not just something that's in India, it's across. So there you have a lot of stakeholders, not just, and these stakeholders are across regions, which means then they're also going to behave differently. So both your internal stakeholders as well as your external customers, they have different needs, they have different requirements. It changes from country to country, region to region. So that's there, the people management or the understanding even of the customer behavior across places becomes very, very important. It's also very important to understand why how the problems come to you, right? Because when you work on something like help, you will also have a team of an operations team that's associated with it internally, and they will have certain policies and certain ways in which they do certain things. So the problem statements that come to me often are the kinds of problem statements where someone will say, oh, I think in this help flow we should just change X. Now if I just said, okay, you said X, now I will go do X, it'll have a lot of implications. And that ties back to what Anusha was saying, right? This is where you actually ask people, okay, why do you want this? Because oftentimes if you ask the why enough number of times, you will suddenly realize what the base problem is. And the base problem might be something else altogether. And fixing it or addressing it might require you to then also think about, okay, if I change it in this way, yes, it's good for us, and yes, it's good for internal stakeholders, but how does this also impact your end customer? And when you're thinking about how it impacts the end customer, it's like, is this the right thing to do for that customer? What is the right way to build that flow so that the customer experience is also right? You don't just change something which leaves somebody hanging somewhere and now they don't know how to actually like solve their problem anymore, right? So that's how it is in, say, what I'm doing right now, versus, say, if I look at something like when I was building new benefits in Prime, right? There it was a lot more work, because we were trying to build benefits which were new for India. There was a lot of work with the Amazon Pay team, because Amazon Pay was something which functioned differently in India versus everywhere else. And there it was more of a business sort of thought process of, okay, what are the kinds of benefits that would be most interesting to offer a Prime member? And therefore, what would you do there? So there, that kind of thinking was a little different. And then obviously then launching that benefit has a different process. So I think those are just two examples from what I have done, but very, very different if you think about the day-to-day challenges and the way in which you would serve that customer and think about that customer problem. But what kind of underlies all of it is still, what does your customer want, and how do you actually solve that problem for the customer in the right way?
That's interesting.
I'll talk about Too Good, right? So Flipkart wanted to start selling refurbished goods. So that's something that I helped Flipkart build out, the customer side of it, right? So I was leading the customer side of it. So what it entailed was trying to understand what decisions, how is it a decision making different for a refurbished purchase versus a normal purchase, right? So let's say you buy a new phone. You're not necessarily thinking about should I pick up unit one versus unit two because they're the same. But then in refurbished, you'll have that small scratch somewhere, and different uh, aspects of it will be, will have different importance for different users, right? For some, they might be, hey, I want the phone to look good overall. For some, it might be, hey, this, as long as the screen is fine, I don't care what's happening on the back, right? If there's a scratch there, etc. So, a big part of what I did was to figure out how to abstract these decisions out into some format which would make decision making easier and still sort of plug and play it with whatever existed on Flipkart, right, as a stack, right? So one part was we did this entire design sprint, which was very interesting because you just get all the stakeholders into a room, right? It's a very quick way of coming to agreement on what is our goal, right? And based on our goal, what are the top three priorities? Based on that, right, what are the problem areas and how do you go about it, right? So you very quickly have alignment in the room, and then based on that, we built out these wireframes, and we'd go to the cafeterias nearby to do checks, things we could do back then, right? That I think that was always fun to see reactions, right? And people always had questions about, so is this what Flipkart's doing? Because the Flipkart badge would be visible. Yeah, so there, the core things that we used to sort of build it out, right? One was knowledge of the existing systems in Flipkart, right? What can I leverage to make my MVP faster? And also sort of to ensure that we are multiplexing whatever Flipkart has, right? You obviously don't want to build everything up from scratch. And then how could this possibly fit in if Flipkart's launching new businesses after this, right? So if I'm making, let's say, I'll take an example of, let's say, search, right? So search will have to work slightly differently for refurbished devices versus new. Now, let's say if a new category comes on board, right? Whatever I'm doing right now, is it going to sort of, and of course, this is in collaboration with the product teams, right? None of this is individual because each area has their own subject matter experts. So will it help them serve a new business as well? So are you building in a way where it's scalable and extensible? So very interesting experience, because while we were building up a new experience on the side, engineering wise, it was a very different sort of a conversation and scaling up. Um, Currently, I lead cancellations and returns, right? A very tricky area, right? Because on one side it's experience heavy, but on the other side you can't really honor it. You have to honor the contract that's set out, and you can't really say yes or no to a lot of requests that come in, right? And it's a complex space with sellers and fulfillment and users, of course. One interesting bit that I've built out here is I'm not the one who actually configures policies here, right? It's a combination with different stakeholders, this categories, and there are people who actually look at what product needs, what kinds of policies. So the product that I built out for them, I think, was very interesting purely because internal stakeholders are very generally, left out. And I think, Divya, you might have seen it in some of the fraud area that you were talking about where you worked, right? It's so critical for the internal stakeholders to then have the right product to effectively serve the end customer. But so it's so easy to gloss over that and say, hey, they can probably make do with whatever they have, right? And sometimes when you give them the same amount of love that you'd give a customer, that you'd give the end consumer, then you see magic happen, right? You'll suddenly see hygiene issues going down. You'll see improvement in overall experience for the end customer. You'll see developer time being spent on RCS going down. um, so yeah, I think what that taught me, something that I've always believed in, is every stakeholder is so important, right? And you got to give them the right due and the right amount of product love. So, yeah.
Right. That's an interesting take. Managing internal stakeholder requirements and actually providing the right to them too. There's one interesting question that has come up a lot of times in the questions that we've invited from the viewers. What are the different how is the work life balance in a PM role, and what kind of salaries are usually offered to product managers, because obviously uh, salary wise it's one of the most it's one of the most profitable careers in the digital tech and digital and tech domain right now. So I think our viewers also want to know that.
Salary is interesting, right? I think when you're getting out of an MBA college, I would say that it's probably honestly not really sure about what the salaries are looking like right now.
I also don't know. I did my MBA so long ago. I think if people
Yeah,
got the numbers that used to come to B school back then, they'll be like, that won't even cover how much I pay for my MBA these days.
yeah. I think what, like 16 was a great package when I graduated. It was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
But how is the work life balance right now? So like, considering that it's a very hectic job and things happen a lot of things happen on the go, and what you do and what you actually plan for months can have implications within seconds. So it's obviously a very it's obviously very precise job that you need to do. So in terms of work life balance, that surely would affect somehow or the other.
so I was talking about the different phases, right? Initially, it completely depends on what phase you're in. If you are in the launch phase, if you've planned out well, things will be okay. But chances are something or the other is not going to work out, right? Like Murphy's law will kick in. So launch phases are going to be hectic. I think it also depends on what phase you are in right now. So I have a team, and or in most scenarios, the team is very closely involved with the actual launch on ground and metric tracking, right? And I look at the dashboard. So 3 years ago, my life used to be super hectic around launch times. It used to be super chill around planning times and PRD writing times, because I would take the time out. And I'd actually work from home at that time because that was like amazing amount of focus. So that's a broad answer. But what I will say is that saying no is extremely important, right? That's something all of us are taught, even more so here, right? I'm in charge of my priority list. I decide what goes in, what doesn't go in. So I'm almost the shield for my team in a way, right? So if I'm not able to protect my own time, I'm not going to be able to do a good job for my team and my engineering team and my analytics team, and the right, I won't be able to direct the right sort of things there. So that's been a tough lesson over the years. That said, it's also very company specific, I think. In Flipkart, I'm very comfortable with, being able to stop my days on certain days at 6. It does stretch again. It's very, again, very dependent on what you're doing at that time.
Yeah, I think when it comes to work-life balance, honestly, for me personally, it's always been a thing of I'm particular about having that balance, because I don't just do what I do, in the sense that product management is something I do by day, but I also write books. So I do need the time to go write my books as well. And having said that, I think what that means is that one is, again, as Anusha was saying, you prioritize and you learn to say no, because it's very easy for everyone and anyone to keep directing stuff to you the minute you start saying yes to everything. And not everything is going to be high priority. And again, it's also what is priority for you and your team based on what you are supposed to deliver, because something might be very high priority for someone else and they're going to come to you and say that, oh, this is my top priority and now you have to help me do this. But if it's say number 5 or number 6 on your list, then you need to make that call to say, okay, these are the goals for my team, and over here it's going to be at this point, which means I can give it to you say 3 weeks from now. I'm not going to be able to give it to you tomorrow. And then that's a negotiation that you do with people to say no. So yeah, I think it becomes very, very important in terms of how you actually prioritize your time, how you prioritize what you're picking up and what you're saying yes to be able to get that work-life balance, because otherwise it's very, very easy to get sucked in. And then the next thing you know, you're pulling, I guess, you're working through the night and so on. But having said that, again, there will be phases where you will have to really push, and this again is company specific. So I have at least seen that with the MNCs to a certain degree, you have like your weekends protected. Like people will still work on weekends, but nobody's going to actively come after you on a weekend, versus in some past roles where I've worked, like you've had to work through the weekend and it was an expectation in the launch. Here you still plan a little better. So yes, you will still have something going wrong and Murphy will hit you and you might do something on the weekend, but you might get a little bit more flexibility there. So I think some of it also comes down to company culture. But having said that, I think even in a place where culturally someone might be expecting you to really stretch, I think early on, if you're able to deliver and show that you're able to deliver, you do get that little bit of leeway to be able to maintain and protect your time. And that becomes very important, because early on in the career, I think, and I'm speaking from personal experience, early on in my career, I was like, I have nothing else happening. I will do anything for work, right? I will keep working through. But over time, you have a family, you have other priorities that come in. So you need to now balance. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to give that same number of hours. So setting that expectation is also not the right way to go about it.
No, that's correct. Absolutely. Interesting. I have one interesting take. So you both have different backgrounds. We've talked about what a typical product manager does in a day. What are the skills needed to build a career in product management, and we've talked about salaries and work-life balance. But now coming to the main topic, what career paths lead to product management and lead from product management. You both have different sets of backgrounds. Divya, you come from not an engineering, typical engineering background, and Anusha has an engineering background plus an MBA. So just wanted to understand what are your takes on how people from different career backgrounds can build a career in product management.
So we have this thing called first principles that we use a lot. Divya, do you use the terminology as well?
I know a lot of people who do. I don't use it as much, but I know enough people who use it. But
right. So it's a favorite for us, right? We call it first principles thinking, which is essentially trying to abstract a problem out as much as possible, break it down into logical components. At that level, right? Secondary research level information about anything is going to be enough, right? So are you thinking enough? So if somebody comes and says, hey, this is going to take a month, let's say, right? And that is an engineering conversation. That's the concern typically most people without a CS background have, right? So you can do two things there. One is you can build a trust relationship with that engineer, or you can ask, hey, what's going to take a month? Can you tell me that, right? And depending on how you're going about it, most people will tell you that, right? And you can always go do a check, but you slowly start getting a sense of if this is the component, will it make sense, right? And if you can keep asking questions the right way, you'll get to the bottom of it. It doesn't matter whether you have a CS background or not. The point is, can you go back to your first principles questioning and not take a answer at a very uber level? Okay. And over time, then you can get there. And see, I've seen people with analytical background come into product management, with business background come in, with engineering background come in, right? Doctors, I've seen all kind of people come into product management. Ultimately, it is that skill set of can you keep the core principles of who are you building it for, why are you building it, should you build it or not? Once you build it, how will you measure it, right? How will you measure if it's failing or if it's a success? How will you scale it up? What are the roadblocks you will hit? who are your stakeholders that you have to align and take with you on the journey, right? So this is the set, honestly, right? Probably the set is very similar for a lot of roles that we do, right? I saw somebody talk about brand management. I saw somebody talk about data sciences in the comment section, right? You probably have to do this in most places. The difference is, again, like Divya spoke about, this is a broad area, right? This is a T. So in a lot of places, your T doesn't have to be as wide. You probably don't have to know about data sciences and brand management, which you have to in this space. So I think where you're coming from doesn't really matter. If you have the attitude where you're able to pick up and get the basics right, then you can skill up depending on where you want to get into.
Yeah, I think that's been my experience as well. I mean, like you mentioned, I didn't have an engineering degree, and I think it's actually very different today because I actually started in product management more than around like 10 years ago. And at that point, actually, people were a lot more particular in India, especially that they did want you to have an engineering background to be a product manager. So I only lucked out even in starting out in product because I worked for Hindustan Times and they had just launched their online business and they were willing to let me go and become a product manager. So I don't think anyone else would have let me do that at that point, which I think has changed a lot, right, since then. Because right now, if you look at it, most companies do not really look for you to be an engineer to be a PM. There are a lot of programs that companies have where even from B schools, if they're doing recruiting, they look for people with less than say 3 or 2 years of work experience and then see who want to get into product management, and then you can actually join in as sort of like an associate product manager or some kind of a rotational program. So a lot of companies are also investing in things like that. So those give you those entry points to actually go and become a product manager. And what people are going to be looking for, like Anusha said, is just how you're approaching it. They're not really going to be looking for, okay, do you understand tech or do you understand data science in depth and so on. They want to see, okay, what the main thing they're going to look for, I think, would be in the work that you've already done, assuming you have some work experience, how have you applied the kind of thinking that you need to apply? So do you ask the right questions? Do you think about how your end customer or stakeholder is going to be impacted? If you can see that thinking from a person, then automatically I think it becomes a lot easier. And the fact that the industry is also now realized that you don't really need a tech background, I think is good, because it helps people get a foot in the door. And then after that, of course, you learn on the job, and you're able to basically, as long as you're able to build that innate curiosity, ask those questions every day, learn as much as you can from all of the stakeholders that you work with, you'll be able to build that career for yourself.
Yeah. By the way, just to add, while I do have a CS background, right? I went into MBA from engineering.
So you didn't use it.
I didn't use it at all, right? And I wasn't the model student in engineering or MBA for that matter. So what I might have picked up is left behind. From MBA, I did a consulting job. I realized I'm not made for it. I quit and I did a UX internship because I figured I want to build, right? How did I end up in a UX internship? Because I was on the Rovio website and I was looking at job descriptions because I wanted to submit an idea. So my CS background did not play any role in getting even a foot in the door for me for product management roles, by the way. Right. It was, again, I was super interested in Android back then. So I would have every single custom ROM tried out. And that is what I think helped more than anything else, right? To figure out, hey, this is a space I like. So passion and interest more than background, honestly.
Right. So no typical background matters. Definitely, engineering is not a must for product management. And one more thing. Considering that we're talking about this, and there are some questions regarding what if viewers need to do any certifications or follow any courses to actually become pursue a career in product management. I just wanted to shed some light on a program that we're doing at Inside Alt Uni, and it's a 2 month long advanced product management program, and I just like to share a few details about it. So this is the program that we're talking about here. and it's a 2 month long program which will cover each and every topic that typical product managers need to know. So obviously, as Divya and Anusha, you mentioned that it's more about the attitude and the skills that you have. It's not just about having a typical background. So this particular program will have all those elements that will enable you to learn the skills and actually crack a product management interview at the end of it. So it is 20 hours, 20 plus hours live learning sessions with industry experts, from Booking.com, Flipkart. Interestingly enough, Anusha is also part of the guest speakers at this program, and we have interview prep and solving case studies after each and every session. So this is a complete package for someone who wants to actually pursue this program and pursue a career in product management. And you can directly, just start learning, irrespective of what background you come from, what skills you carry. I think this will give you a very good head start onto, cracking product management interviews. And this is the sort of curriculum that we'll be covering. It starts from 5th June, and we'll be covering fundamentals of product management, user UX, and analytics and data, and communication and stakeholder management. After each module, there are, if you can see the guest speaker sessions after each module, and then we have the council sessions that one-on-one career counseling with product management experts that you can obviously will help you figure out your way ahead in the career. And the main lectures will be delivered by Elora Nath, and she's an ISB alumna, and she's a senior product manager at Booking.com. And we have three guest experts, Anusha, Evan, and Harshil. They are from different top digital companies, and these are some of the testimonials that we have received for this program. So I think it's a very good start kit for someone who wants to pursue a career in the product management. And we have the link in the description, also in the live chat. If you want to give it a look, you can also download the brochure and just talk to us, and we'll figure out how you can sign up for this, right? So yeah, there was one more question that had come up. What are some of the hard facts or myths which which are usually associated with product management? Since you guys have been in the industry for so long, I think you guys might have come across certain myths that are associated with it.
I think one is what we just discussed, right, which is
Yeah.
engineering. Do we need to know engineering, and what level of coding do we need to know? So I think that we've done with, that we have dispelled.
I think another myth is also where some folks also have, and I think that was reflected in a lot of the audience questions as well, where people were also wondering if you need an MBA to be a product manager. Again, I don't think that's also necessary. I have known people who have gone into product management from other backgrounds without an MBA either. So I think that might be a second myth. I think people believe that you need to have certain background to be a PM, which is probably not true.
Right. Right. So, and what is a particular trajectory that a product manager will follow, in his or her career, and like what is the growth in a career look like for a product manager?
I think it's different again based off of the company. So, for example, if you look at something like in Amazon, you would grow in product to a certain level. So, like you potentially be like up until a senior manager level or so, you would be in product. But Amazon also has, as you go higher, the product roles get more broad-based and more business focused. So ultimately you would end up becoming like a GM or a director. And at that point, you could either be leading a team which only has product managers, or you could be having a team which has product, design, tech, or even like ops and other such, right? So it kind of at some point branches out from product into a more sort of, I think, business kind of role in that company. Versus if I look at Uber, in a lot of cases, Uber has a separate sort of product org, right? So your product growth will be all the way through up until one day you become like a chief product officer, for example. And you're allied with various businesses that you work with, but it's not like one sort of core business team. And even this might change within these large companies for certain scenarios. So I think the path actually depends on the company as well as the person. So I know folks who want to stay in product, and therefore they look for those companies where you're kind of growing in the product path itself, versus others who are actually looking at product management as a way to say eventually become business leaders, go down and become CEOs, and therefore now you're looking at the more sort of like broad-based approach to it. So I don't think, again, there is like a one size fits all sort of career path. And this, I think, is true of anything, by the way. I think even if you're like in brand or in sales, etc., this would actually vary. I really doubt that you're kind of like going down this one road. Everyone's road gets, I think, different.
Yeah. Some of the most common paths I've seen is, like Divya was talking about, two kinds of companies. Some companies force you to sort of go towards a GM role more, right? And that could be a product plus business sort of a role. Definitely, I see some companies evolving there. It could also be a product plus engineering sort of a role. We have companies which go there as well, right? Because after a point of time, basically, you want people to start taking more ownership. And the thing about product is, you are not really the executing arm anywhere, right? You drive the metrics, but the actual execution of God. So it goes towards one of the execution arms, product plus one of the execution arms in a way, right? There are companies which do pure product, but I have not, I mean, I think they are sort of, everybody's trying to figure out the right model. Uh, uh, Places like Microsoft, for example, have a more of a programish angle to it, right? Where you actually have program managers. So that's one aspect. If you are sticking to the org, but I've seen a lot of people like startups is another big route, right? Like a lot of people just quit and do something because you're so close to the problem statement, opportunity. You're frustrated that hey, we could be building this out, but we're not building this out,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's another big area where I see a lot of very promising people go and be like, I'm just going to go and build stuff out, right? And if you have been in the right space, then you know the right basics, and then that becomes another good opportunity that way. Yeah.
Right. So what are the most frequently asked questions that you also might have come across? So you might have asked someone in an interview for a product manager role. Any insights onto that?
Sure. I mean, see, this is you have your standard build X for Y, right? Can you build an alarm clock for the differently abled? Build a microwave for somebody who's operating from a wheelchair? Right. That's one sort of questions. The second sort of questions is, can you 10x something, right? How will you increase Instagram's time spent on Instagram by so much? The thing is, all of these are trick questions in a way, right? Nobody's actually asking you to go down the question that's being asked. And the first expectation is, can you please explore the problem itself, right? So, which is when somebody's saying, can you build a microwave for somebody in a wheelchair? Explore what a microwave is, right? So, something as minute as you put the food on the side of on a table or on the kitchen slab next to the microwave. You open the microwave door, then you go take the food, and then you put it in the microwave. Now imagine that from the lens of somebody who's in a wheelchair, right? So you're expecting that kind of agility and comfortable movement to happen, right? And that is where opportunities come up about what will you do, what will you build, what will you design, right? Something like, let's say food is burning in the microwave, you will run back. Can somebody in a wheelchair do the same thing, right? So yeah, so most of the interview questions are labeled like this, right? Even when you say 10x Instagram, right? Can you think about what is Instagram doing? Can it truly get there given the base it already has? So really explore the question. But these are the typical questions, and this is the typical way we expect people to go about it, right? Again, goes back to truly understand what the problem you're trying to solve is, frame that, and then go to build a product around it.
Yeah, I think you also have like your standard behavioral questions in addition to this.
Yeah.
Like personally, even when if I'm asking someone a question around a past project that they have done, or or just like even walking through something from their resume, right? I often ask people to just walk me through one thing that they're really proud of that they've done. There, again, what I'm looking for is how you went about doing it, what the thought process was, how you approached the problem. So oftentimes people be like, oh, you know, I did this, I launched this, finished. But the candidate that will stick out will be the person who's talking about, you know, this was the problem that the company was facing. This is what I thought about it. This is how I came up with that solution. And even at the end of the story, if they tell me that, you know, the ultimate thing that they didn't work, that's all right. You get the points for like the approach and how you've actually gone ahead and done that. Similarly, like questions around trying to understand how people deal with conflict, how they're able to deal with in situations where people are not aligned to their vision or their idea. Have they been able to like push and persist and show some persistence in going around and getting that adopted? I think those are also good questions to get a sense of whether the person will be successful in a role. Sometimes we also do a sort of like walkthrough saying, again, similar to what Anusha was saying, give a problem statement, but get more tactical around like the actual final solution and what it would end up looking like as well all through. But again, I think the important thing, like Anusha also pointed out, was that it's not just to think about this is the question, don't immediately jump to the answer, because if you jump to that final answer, even if it's correct, you're probably not getting points at that for that at all.
It's all about the approach that we keep looking for, right? How are you going about it? Because that's what you will replicate again and again and again, right? It's not that idea, and ideas are cheap, right? It's the how did you get to decide that this is the idea for this problem and how will you build out around it? Yeah.
Right. So it's more of behavioral and situational questions. But the main important thing is to figure out what the product need is, the user need is, and how the product can actually adapt to solve that consumer need, and that is the crux of it, right? So, but not necessarily you might not necessarily have questions from a tech perspective on how to do this and how to do that. So that is, I think,
Tech
one.
questions are so tech questions are typically in the tech round they're more directed to how do you work with engineering, not necessarily about build something and show us, right? I know there are like a bunch of Google videos out there about the tech round and they're super scary. In all the interviews I've given, honestly, I've never faced it, and I don't think we do that right now, right? Because you're expected, see, when you work in a multifunctional area, you're expected to trust the other functions and what they do, right? You want them to do their job, you don't want to go and do their job. So no, tech questions are different. They're more about how did you go about it, right? How do you think about it? Are you able to have a conversation with those people, right, in the right way, not about actually building it out.
Yeah, and I would say that at most, if they got technical, at least what I have seen while interviewing is at most they will potentially ask you about things like the architecture of something you've worked on. Meaning, at a high level, do you know the building blocks of the product that you have so far worked on if you have past experience? And that is something that if you've been in product management, you will know that much. Because if you've been talking to your engineers every day, you will know the building blocks of your system. And they're not going to go to specifics over there of like, you know, the kind of things that the engineers would know about, because again, that's not the expectation from you.
Right. So essentially, it's about what the product management is about getting work done, and so you should be able to do that, and that's what recruiters look for, right? So, yeah. So I'll just pick up one last question, and we just move towards the end of the webinar. What was considering that you again both come from different backgrounds? What was the main driving force? And what was the main intent behind pursuing a career? What drove you? What was it? Was it the passion for the career, or you just happen to be in this career by luck? So what was it?
I can take that first. Yeah. So I think in my case, I stumbled upon it because I didn't know what product management was. It wasn't even a thing in 2008. It just so happened that I wanted to work in media. And the only reason, by the way, I wanted to work in media is because I did MBA right after my undergrad. And my undergrad was in something called visual communications, which meant I spent 3 years watching movies, making short films, making ad films, and pretending that somewhere I was going to find a career where I would become a director or an ad filmmaker or write copy or do something like that. Realized it doesn't pay and jumped into MBA. So at the end of that, I was like, I will go work in media because maybe I know something about media. And I stumbled into product. I think after 4 years of being in product management, I did have this moment where I very strongly thought that UX is something which is interesting. And when I actually went to Berkeley to study at the School of Information, I had a momentary thought that while I know UX would be very helpful for being a PM also, I did have a vague thought that maybe I might want to consider becoming a designer instead. And by the end of those 2 years, I realized that no, I actually liked being a PM more than I would have liked being a designer full time or being anything else. So that's how I kind of went back into product management at the end of it. So I haven't really done much else. I've done a little bit of product marketing and those kinds of allied things, but I think mine was completely accidental, and I definitely didn't think about it. Like, but if you would ask me when I was younger, obviously I wouldn't have even thought of such a thing.
Yeah. Hey, that's interesting. So you went to college to sort of do something else, and then you realize that what you're doing is what
Yeah,
you want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I went also because I was like, when I did the MBA, I just did it because I didn't know what else to do in my life at that point in time. So I thought this was a more informed decision.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, right? I did engineering and MBA, and I think if I went back to MBA now, which is still like a dream somewhere, right? I do want to go back and study for something. Maybe it's leveling up in behavioral sciences is this huge new area of interest for me right now. But that's interesting. Like maybe that will help me do a plus plus in product management itself, right? But yeah, to the journey of how I ended up here, I think it was again very exploratory. By nature, I've always been the early adopter, or at least I was till 2 years ago before I had two kids. I mean, like the first one is 4 years old, but then 4 years ago. So always been an early adopter one. Whatever new technology is there, I've loved trying it. I bought Dogecoin in 2014. Can't figure out where it is kept right now. So that's sort of a personality, right? I love all kinds of technology. One and two, I think I'm a builder and a tinkerer, right? So I've always loved playing with carpentry and I build cardboard toys for my children right now. So and I like sketching, by the way. I love sketching. So originally I thought I wanted to get into graphic design, but then I realized it doesn't, it's very tough to get into, and pay is sometimes, you
I
only get
learned that the
yeah,
hard way in undergrad because I also sketch, and in undergrad itself, I learned this is not working out.
yeah. So I was like, and to me, I felt like if I was not bringing in my perspective, right? If I was just sort of sketching what I saw, then what am I adding to the world, right? What's my addition? So then I said, this is not what I want to do. So then I went into consulting because I said it was innovation consulting. A lot of great learnings there, but then I also realized that's not what I'm good at, right? I want to build. So there I stumbled upon it, right? I had gone to the Rovio website, like I was saying, to submit an idea. I thought Angry Birds should have a competition where everybody should come and like people should be able to build levels and beat other people's levels, and that's how you get to a championship. And there I was looking at the job descriptions, okay, and I saw the UX designer. Like this is great, right? You get to design experiences, but it's so deep and it's so relevant because so many things are so messed up. And that's sort of how I got into, and I was figuring out how to then get into it, right? Do I go to a school? Because I'm not sure if I'll have the commitment to actually see it through, right? And I've just finished my MBA a couple of years ago. What if so then luckily I put my portfolio together, and Microsoft also thought it would be super interesting to see somebody who's done an MBA who's interested in sketching experience, what it will be like to bring them in with a bunch of interns from NID and do a UX internship. And as a part of that, I realized, man, this pixel perfection is extreme. I can't do it, right? I'm too far away from technology for my liking, too far away from strategy for my liking at that point of time, right? So I think being a PM then was the best choice for me because at even at the entry level, you are supposed to be able to bring all of this together. Yeah, you're supposed to have a good design sense, which I luckily had sort of developed because of my time there. Technology I was always a big fan of, right? So always exploring the extremes of things, right? How can you stretch something? What can you get out of it? And then strategy was anyway playing in. So that's how I ended up with in product management.
right. I think that was pretty interesting. Both of you had interesting, your journeys into this career, and I think it just you just happen to be happen to find the right way, and I think that's best. So yeah, I think we've answered a lot of questions, and if there are any more questions, you can obviously put it down in the comments, and we'll try to ensure that we get back to you on that.
I
Uh,
want to take 1 minute here. Sorry for the interruption, right? But I was looking at the comments, and a lot of questions again and again seem to be about, hey, I'm doing this. Can I be a PM? Right? Again, what you're doing, right? Almost everything that we go through as a curriculum does two things. It gives us domain knowledge. It also teaches us how to learn, by the way, right? That's one big learning that we have in the first, let's say, 2 decades of our life. How do we learn something new? And that part is always going to be relevant irrespective of what job you do, right? So whether you're talking about BE or BBA or right, if you're talking about data, you're talking about IIT versus non-IIT, do I have to do MBA? So PM luckily is a space where if you're able to bring the basics of what you learned into it, you will be able to work it out, right? The bigger barrier is how do you get a foot into the interviews, right? And there, if you're going to be talking about, hey, can I get into a Microsoft, right? The same question applies for engineering also. Can you get into a Microsoft from any engineering college? Can you get an interview? Probably not, right? But after some years of relevant experience, can you get an interview there? You can, right? So then the question is, depending on where you're at, what is the right sort of space to start from? That's the right question you should be asking, not whether with this background can I get into PM or not. So I think that question is answered. Yeah, sorry, just wanted to.
Thank you so much, Anusha. And yes, I think this whole session was quite insightful. And thank you so much, Divya, and thank you so much, Anusha, for answering all our queries. And thank you to all the viewers who've been asking questions and who've also submitted questions beforehand. And do check out the link in the description, and we expect to see you all for the advanced product management program. And you have the link in the description and the live chat. So yeah, thank you for watching. Good night. Good night, Divya. Good night.
You.